He saved 3 Apaches 10 years ago. They came back, marry us. The cowboy's response surprised. The sun had just begun to climb over the wide, dusty plains when Jack Thompson saddled his horse. He had been awake since dawn, the smell of fresh hay and the crisp morning air filling his lungs. Jack was no ordinary cowboy. He had spent his life wandering the open lands, learning the ways of the wind, the dust, and the creatures that called the desert home. His weathered hat shaded his eyes, and his boots were caked with dried mud from yesterday's ride. The ranch he managed wasn't far from town, but it was far enough that Jack often found himself alone, speaking only to the animals or the whispering breeze. He liked it that way. Quiet suited him. That morning, Jack had a simple plan: check the fences along the northern edge of his land and make sure the cattle were safe. The clouds hung low and gray, hinting at a storm, but the weather in the west was always unpredictable. Horses stamped their hooves impatiently, sensing the electricity in the air. Jack patted his horse's neck and nudged him forward, the familiar creak of the saddle comforting him as he rode. As he moved closer to the canyon, Jack noticed something unusual. The normally dry riverbed was swollen with rushing water, and the wind carried the sound of panicked voices. He pulled his horse to a stop and listened. The voices were high-pitched, urgent, and terrified. Jack's heart quickened. He had seen many dangers in his life: snake bites, stampedes, bandits. But the sound of people in real danger made his pulse race differently. Without hesitation, he urged his horse forward, following the voices. He rounded a bend and his eyes widened. There, trapped in the fast-moving waters, were 3 young Apache women. Their hair clung to their faces, drenched and matted, their clothes torn from the struggle against the sudden flood. The river had risen faster than anyone could have imagined, and the canyon walls made escape nearly impossible. The women clutched onto rocks, their small hands slipping in the icy water, faces twisted in fear. Jack's stomach tightened. He had to act quickly. Jack dismounted and ran toward the edge, scanning the terrain. The canyon was slippery, and one wrong step could send him tumbling into the roaring river. But he didn't hesitate. He saw a large boulder near the edge that could serve as a stepping point and slowly made his way closer. "Hold on, I've got you," he shouted, his voice carrying over the roar of the flood. One of the women looked up, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. She barely nodded, but Jack could see the glimmer of hope ignite in her gaze. Reaching the first woman wasn't easy. The water was strong, pushing him back as he leaned against the current. Jack grabbed her arm just in time as she slipped, pulling her toward the safer rock. "You're going to be okay," he assured her, though he wasn't entirely sure how he would get all 3 to safety. The first woman clung to him, trembling and gasping, water dripping from her hair into her eyes. He held her tightly and moved carefully toward a more secure spot, feeling the pull of the water beneath his boots. Once the first was safe, Jack didn't pause. The second woman struggled further downstream, the current catching her off guard. He sprinted across the wet rocks, his boots slipping but his determination unshakable. He reached out and grabbed her wrist just as she was about to be swept away. Her grip was small but strong, and Jack realized how terrified she must have been. He pulled her toward him, climbing onto the boulder where the first woman was waiting. Together, they tried to calm each other with soft words, though the danger was far from over. The third woman was the farthest away, caught in the middle of the rushing water. Jack could see the panic on her face, the way she screamed for help as the river seemed ready to swallow her whole. He didn't think. He ran, leaping from rock to rock with his heart pounding. The water splashed against his legs, icy and relentless, but he pushed on. Reaching her, he extended his hand, gripping her tightly. "I won't let you go," he promised, feeling the strain of the current against both their bodies. Inch by inch, he pulled her toward the safety of the rocks. Finally, all 3 were on solid ground, dripping and exhausted, but alive. Jack took a moment to catch his breath, his chest heaving. The women were shivering, and he quickly tore pieces of his shirt to wrap around their shoulders. They looked at him with wide eyes, mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak, but the words were lost in the sound of the river. Jack just nodded, letting them know it was all right. They were safe now. After the initial fear subsided, Jack noticed their injuries, small cuts, bruises, and scratches from the rocks. He guided them to a dry area nearby and carefully checked each one. "It's nothing serious," he said softly, smiling to reassure them. One of the women, the eldest, finally managed a shaky "thank you" in broken English. Jack nodded, brushing water from his face. He didn't need thanks. The sight of them alive was reward enough. Hours passed as the storm began to subside. The sky turned a dull orange as the sun struggled through clouds, casting long shadows across the canyon. Jack offered them food and water from his pack. They sat together on the rocks, quiet at first, then gradually sharing stories of their village and the sudden flood. Though the language barrier was challenging, they communicated through gestures, expressions, and laughter that broke through the tension. Jack listened intently, fascinated by their courage and resilience. By the time night fell, Jack had built a small fire to keep them warm. He sat nearby, keeping watch while the women huddled together. The crackling flames lit their faces, showing relief and gratitude. Jack's own heart was heavy with emotion. He had acted without thinking of reward, yet the connection he felt with these strangers was profound. It was a reminder that courage was often not about grand gestures, but about stepping up when someone needed help most. That night, Jack barely slept. He kept thinking about the women, wondering how far their village was and what they would do now. He knew they needed to return home safely, but he also realized that fate had brought them together for a brief but life-changing moment. In the darkness, he whispered a quiet prayer for their continued safety. The desert was silent, save for the occasional hoot of an owl, and for the first time in years, Jack felt a deep sense of purpose beyond his daily routines. When dawn arrived, Jack guided the three women toward the safer paths that led back to their village. He walked beside them, making sure no further harm came their way. They turned to him one last time before disappearing over the ridge, eyes shining with gratitude and respect. Jack watched them go, a small smile on his face. He knew he had done the right thing, and though their lives had been saved, he also felt that something within himself had changed. For the next several years, Jack often thought back to that day. The memory of the three women, their courage, and the bond formed in the midst of danger stayed with him. Even when life on the ranch became lonely, he felt that invisible thread connecting him to them, a reminder of the moment when human kindness and bravery met in the harsh beauty of the desert. Jack never expected to see them again, but the story of that day would remain a quiet, enduring part of his life. It was the kind of day that defined a man, not through fame or wealth, but through simple acts of courage and compassion. And though the years passed, the memory of rushing water, frightened eyes, and the hands he had held in trust stayed vivid in his mind, shaping him into the man who would one day be surprised by a reunion that no one, not even he, could have imagined. After the three Apache women disappeared over the ridge, Jack Thompson returned to his ranch, the memory of that day lingering like the soft haze of morning mist. Life on the plains was quiet once again, but the experience had left a mark deep inside him. Jack went about his daily routines, feeding the cattle, repairing fences, and tending to the horses. But every so often, his thoughts drifted back to the three faces he had saved. He could still see the fear in their eyes, the way their small hands had clutched his, and the gratitude that had shone through despite the chaos of the flood. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, yet Jack's mind refused to forget that summer afternoon. Though he never spoke of it to anyone in town, cowboys were not known for sharing emotional moments. He often found himself riding toward the canyon, half hoping, half wondering if fate might bring them back. The thought made his heart race, but he also knew life moved forward. There were cattle to feed, fences to mend, and storms to survive. In the quiet of the desert nights, though, his imagination filled the empty spaces with memories of that courageous moment when he had saved lives that were not his own. Jack's ranch life had always been solitary. He preferred the company of animals to people, finding comfort in the simple rhythm of chores and the honesty of the land. Yet after that day, he realized how much one act of kindness could connect him to others, even strangers from a culture and world very different from his own. In the evenings, as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, he thought about the women and what had become of them. Were they safe? Had they returned to their families? Did they think about him as he thought about them? Seasons changed, bringing harsh winters and scorching summers. Jack experienced the routine challenges of cowboy life, sudden storms, sick animals, and the loneliness that sometimes crept into his heart. Despite this, he carried the memory of that day like a quiet treasure. Every river that swelled after rain, every sudden flash flood, reminded him of their struggle and his own narrow escape from helplessness. He sometimes told himself that he had only done what anyone should do, yet deep down, he knew it was courage that had guided him, not duty. 10 years passed, each year bringing its own trials. Jack's hair grayed, and his once spry movements slowed slightly, though his spirit remained as steady as ever. He became known in the nearby town for his honesty, his skill with animals, and his quiet, thoughtful presence. People respected him, but he kept mostly to himself, finding comfort in the familiar lands he called home. He never spoke of the day he had saved the 3 Apache women. It was a memory too sacred to share, something between him and the desert, the river, and the echo of frightened voices calling for help. Despite the passing years, Jack never stopped thinking about them. Every now and then, he imagined what their lives might have been like. Perhaps they had grown strong and independent, as the desert had made him. Perhaps they had told stories of the cowboy who had risked everything to save them. The thought made him smile. He hoped they had found happiness and safety, though he understood that life in the desert and the surrounding lands was never easy. One summer evening, Jack was walking through his barn, checking on the horses, when he heard the distant sound of hooves. He paused, listening intently. The sound was unusual. It wasn't the regular trot of his own horses. Curiosity sparked, and he walked toward the open fields. The wind carried the sound closer, and soon he could make out a small group approaching. As they drew near, Jack's eyes widened. 3 women rode toward him, older now but unmistakably the same 3 he had saved all those years ago. The realization sent a shock through him, leaving him momentarily speechless. They arrived at his ranch, their horses tired but steady, and dismounted gracefully. Jack studied their faces, the same determined eyes, the same glimmers of courage, now framed by years of experience and strength. They smiled at him warmly, their expressions filled with gratitude, joy, and something else, an unexpected playfulness. "We never forgot you," one of them said softly, her voice carrying across the open field. Jack could hardly believe it. 10 years had passed, and yet they had remembered, traveling all this way just to see him again. The women began to speak more, sharing stories of their lives since that fateful day. They had returned to their village, grown stronger, and faced challenges of their own. They had never stopped thinking about Jack, the man who had risked everything to save them. As they spoke, Jack listened quietly, amazed at how much their lives had changed and how much courage they had gained. Their gratitude was palpable, and it moved him deeply. He realized that saving them had not only affected their lives, but had left a lasting impression on his own. Then came the moment that stunned him completely. One of the women, with a twinkle in her eye and a mischievous smile, spoke the words he never expected to hear. "Marry us." Jack froze, blinking in disbelief. The offer was shocking, unexpected, and entirely out of the ordinary. He had never imagined that his act of courage would lead to this. He laughed, not out of mockery, but because he was genuinely surprised. The idea seemed impossible, yet it was clear that their proposal came from a place of deep respect, affection, and gratitude. Jack's mind raced. He thought about the years that had passed, the solitude he had grown accustomed to, and the life he had built for himself. Marriage was not something he had ever pursued, nor was it something he felt prepared to accept in such an unusual circumstance. Yet looking into the eyes of the women, he saw a reflection of that day long ago, the fear, the courage, the connection that had formed in a life-or-death moment. He realized that their proposal, while unexpected, was a testament to the bond they shared, a bond that transcended years and distance. Rather than responding immediately, Jack took a deep breath and considered his words carefully. He wanted to honor their gratitude without giving false hope or making promises he could not keep. After a moment he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I am deeply honored," he said, "and I will never forget the courage you showed that day, but marriage is not the answer. What we share is stronger than that. It is respect, trust, and a connection that time cannot break." The women listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and understanding. Jack continued, explaining that true courage and gratitude were not measured by grand gestures or obligations, but by the way people treated one another, the respect they carried, and the memories they kept alive. He suggested another idea, a lifelong friendship built on trust and shared experiences. He invited them to stay at the ranch, to celebrate their reunion, and to honor the bond they had formed 10 years ago. The women nodded, their smiles returning, now brighter than ever. They understood that this was a gift beyond marriage, a recognition of the bravery, compassion, and connection that had defined their lives. The rest of the day was spent in laughter, storytelling, and quiet reflection. Jack guided them through the ranch, showing them the fields, the horses, and the places where he had worked tirelessly over the years. They shared their own stories, talking about the challenges they had faced, the lessons they had learned, and the strength they had discovered within themselves. Jack listened, feeling a deep sense of pride and wonder. He realized that saving them had changed him as much as it had changed them. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Jack sat by the fire with the three women. They roasted corn, shared water, and watched the stars appear one by one. The bond they had formed a decade ago had grown stronger, now reinforced by years of memory, gratitude, and shared understanding. Jack thought about how life often brought unexpected reunions, and how courage, kindness, and honesty could leave lasting impressions across time. That night, as they slept under the open sky, Jack felt a sense of peace. He knew that while marriage had not been the answer, the true reward was in the connection they had maintained, the respect they had shown one another, and the memories that would last a lifetime. The three women had returned, not to change his life, but to remind him of the courage and compassion that had always been at the heart of who he was. Jack drifted to sleep with a smile, knowing that life's most meaningful moments were often unplanned, born from acts of bravery and kindness, and nurtured by the passage of time. He looked forward to the days ahead, ready to share stories, laughter, and friendship with the women who had once been strangers but were now part of his life forever. Life on the ranch had changed in small but noticeable ways since the reunion. Jack Thompson had grown used to having the three women around. They moved with a quiet confidence, helping with chores, preparing meals, and learning the routines of ranch life. Jack had expected to feel awkward at first, but instead, he found their presence comforting. Their laughter filled the air, their voices brightened the long, quiet afternoons, and their energy seemed to breathe life into the dusty plains. Yet, even in this newfound joy, a challenge quietly waited, testing Jack's patience, courage, and sense of fairness. It started one morning when Jack was out checking the fences near the northern edge of his land. The three women were nearby, collecting firewood and tending to a small garden they had started near the barn. The wind was brisk, carrying the scent of earth and grass, and the horses were restless, sensing the coming storm. Jack noticed something unusual, smoke rising in the distance, just beyond the canyon. He squinted against the bright sun and realized it wasn't a campfire. The smoke was thick, dark, and moving in a way that suggested trouble. Without hesitation, Jack rode toward it. The women followed cautiously on foot, carrying blankets and water in case anyone needed help. As he approached, he could see the source. A small herd of cattle trapped near a steep ravine, panicked by the sudden smoke and commotion. The cattle were stampeding, some slipping dangerously close to the edge. Jack's heart raced. One wrong move could send several of the animals tumbling into the ravine, and any attempt to stop them would put a human in danger. He knew this was no ordinary challenge. It was a test of skill, courage, and quick thinking. Jack took a deep breath and assessed the situation. The river that had once threatened the three women was now calm, but the terrain was just as treacherous. He spotted a narrow path along the cliffside, just wide enough for him and a horse to pass. He would have to lead the cattle carefully, guiding them away from danger while keeping his own balance. The women watched from a safe distance, their faces tense but determined. They trusted Jack just as he had trusted them years ago, but this time the challenge was different. It involved animals, not people, and the stakes were high. Jack moved quickly, signaling to the herd with firm but gentle commands. The cattle were frightened, their hooves thudding against rocks and dirt as they tried to escape the smoke. Jack's horse navigated the narrow path with precision, Jack leaning close to calm the animals and steer them in the right direction. The women stayed behind, throwing water and blankets over the smaller calves to keep them from panicking. The scene was chaotic, but Jack remained focused, remembering the calm determination that had helped him save lives a decade earlier. Suddenly, a loud bellow echoed through the canyon. One of the larger bulls, startled by the smoke, broke from the herd and charged straight toward the edge of the cliff. Jack's heart stopped. He spurred his horse forward, catching the bull with a rope he carried, pulling it back just in time. The bull fought, but Jack's strength and skill held steady. The women gasped but did not scream, their trust in Jack unwavering. With every move, he felt the same adrenaline as that day when he had saved the three women from the flood. This was different, yet the principles were the same: courage, quick thinking, and never giving up. Hours passed as Jack worked tirelessly, guiding the herd away from danger and calming the panicked animals. The sun climbed high, sweat dripping from his brow, and the women assisted where they could, their presence a steady source of support. Together, they managed to lead every animal to safety, away from the cliff and into the open plains. Jack finally exhaled, his chest heavy with exhaustion but filled with relief. The challenge had been enormous, but it was met not alone, but with the quiet teamwork and trust that had developed over the years. After the ordeal, the group returned to the ranch, all of them tired but triumphant. The women cleaned and tended to minor scrapes and bruises they had sustained, and Jack checked the horses and cattle. Despite the exhaustion, there was a shared sense of accomplishment. They had faced danger together, and the bond between them grew stronger. Jack realized that life often tested people in unexpected ways. Courage wasn't only about facing life-or-death situations with humans. It was also about confronting challenges with patience, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. That evening, the storm they had sensed earlier arrived, drenching the ranch with sudden rain and strong winds. The women moved quickly to secure tools, feed animals, and protect the property. Jack worked alongside them, grateful for their willingness to learn and help. He looked at them and smiled, thinking of how far they had come since that day 10 years ago when he had saved their lives. They had grown brave, resourceful, and wise, qualities that no one could have predicted. Yet despite all this growth, Jack could see traces of the frightened young women he had once known, a reminder of their resilience and strength. As night fell, the storm passed, leaving a cool calm over the plains. The women and Jack gathered around the fire, sharing a simple meal and recounting the day's events. Laughter mixed with relief, and stories of past experiences flowed easily. Jack listened to their tales, marveling at how the years had shaped them. They spoke of their village, their families, and the challenges they had faced since leaving the canyon. Jack shared his own stories too, tales of life on the ranch, the hardships of the land, and the lessons he had learned. The conversation deepened the connection between them, weaving a shared understanding that went beyond words. Despite the laughter, a quiet tension lingered in Jack's mind. The day's events reminded him that life could change in an instant. The challenges they faced were unpredictable, and the responsibility he felt for those around him weighed heavily. Jack realized that courage was not just about physical strength. It was about knowing when to act, how to protect others, and making decisions that balanced risk with care. The women had witnessed this firsthand, and Jack could see the respect and trust in their eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken bond they shared. The days following the storm were filled with routine work, but Jack noticed something different in the women. They moved with purpose, confident in their abilities yet cautious when necessary. They asked questions, learned quickly, and offered suggestions. Jack felt proud of their progress and grateful for their willingness to engage with the land, the animals, and the work required to maintain the ranch. This was a challenge of its own, teaching and guiding without controlling, sharing knowledge while respecting their independence. It was a delicate balance, but one that Jack found rewarding. One afternoon, as Jack rode along the canyon's edge, he reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. 10 years ago, he had acted on instinct, driven by the immediate need to save lives. Today, the challenges were different but equally demanding. Leadership, patience, and understanding were as important as courage and physical skill. The women had grown into remarkable individuals, capable of facing danger, making decisions, and contributing meaningfully to the world around them. Jack felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his actions had helped shape their path, even in a small way. Yet Jack also knew that the real test of character was not the dramatic moments, but the everyday choices. How they worked together, respected each other, and faced the uncertainties of life on the plains would define them as much as any single heroic act. The stampede had been a test and they had passed, but life was unpredictable, and Jack understood that more challenges would come. The bond they shared, forged in danger and strengthened over time, was the most valuable asset they had. It would guide them through whatever lay ahead. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Jack and the women sat quietly on a rock, watching the world calm after the storm. They didn't need words to express their feelings. Gratitude, respect, and trust hung in the air between them. Jack felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that their lives were intertwined in a way that was meaningful and lasting. He thought about the unpredictability of life, the courage required to face challenges, and the importance of acting with integrity and compassion. That night, as the ranch settled into silence, Jack lay awake, reflecting on the day's events. The stampede had reminded him that life was full of unexpected challenges, and that courage was tested in countless ways, not just in dramatic, life-or-death moments. He felt proud not for himself, but for the women and the animals, for the way they had responded, adapted, and thrived under pressure. The bond forged in crisis had deepened, creating a foundation of trust, understanding, and mutual respect that would endure for years to come. Jack realized that life on the plains was unpredictable, filled with sudden challenges and unforeseen dangers. but it was also filled with moments of connection, courage, and growth. He had learned that day, and reaffirmed through countless others since, that true bravery was not measured by a single act, but by the way people faced challenges together, supported one another, and remained true to themselves and those they cared for. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained, guiding Jack and the women as they continued their journey together, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Life on the ranch had settled into a rhythm after the storm and the stampede, but Jack Thompson sensed that a deeper test of character was coming, not from the land, not from nature, and not even from danger, but from the human heart itself. The presence of the three Apache women had transformed his daily life. Their laughter, their voices, and their quiet confidence had made the once lonely ranch feel alive. Jack had grown accustomed to seeing them work alongside him, but he also realized that their reunion brought more than joy. It brought questions, emotions, and the weight of the bond that had tied them together for so many years. Jack had always believed that courage was measured in moments of immediate danger. That belief had served him well when he had saved the three women 10 years ago, and when he had faced the stampeding cattle. But life had a different way of teaching lessons, and now Jack began to understand that true courage often involved understanding oneself, being honest with others, and making difficult decisions that affected everyone. He knew that the women had returned with expectations, and while he deeply appreciated their presence and gratitude, he realized that the situation required clarity, wisdom, and care. One morning, Jack noticed a shift in their behavior. The women were quieter than usual, exchanging glances that he could not fully interpret. Their smiles were warm, but there was a hint of hesitation, as though they wanted to ask something important but were unsure how. Jack felt a familiar mix of curiosity and concern. He remembered their earlier words, the surprising proposal of marriage, and realized that their feelings, though unspoken now, might be influencing their actions. He wanted to honor them, but he also knew that honesty was crucial. Jack called them together near the barn, where the morning sun cast long shadows across the yard. "I want to speak with you all," he said gently. The women gathered, sensing the seriousness in his tone. Jack took a deep breath and began. "You came back into my life after so many years, and I am grateful. Grateful for your courage, your presence, and the bond we share. But I need to be honest with you, as I hope you will be honest with me." The women listened, their faces attentive. Jack continued. "When you first said you wanted to marry me, I was surprised. I never expected it. And while I am deeply honored by your feelings, I need to explain my own thoughts. Marriage is not the answer to what we share. What we have is rare. It is trust, friendship, and respect. It is a connection formed in danger and nurtured over time, and it cannot be confined to one single idea or promise." For a moment, there was silence. The wind whispered through the trees, and the animals grazed quietly in the fields. Jack could see the women reflecting on his words, the mix of emotions evident in their eyes. He realized that this moment, though difficult, was important. It was a chance to define their relationship in a way that honored their shared history and the respect they had cultivated over the years. He wanted them to understand that his refusal was not a rejection of them as people but a recognition of the depth and complexity of their bond. One of the women, the eldest, finally spoke. Her voice was steady but soft. "Jack, we understand. We did not come here to make demands or to force anything upon you. We came because we never forgot what you did for us, and because we wanted to show our gratitude and our connection. We hoped for more, perhaps, but your honesty is what matters most." The other two women nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of relief and understanding. Jack felt a wave of respect for them, realizing that their courage extended beyond life-threatening situations. They were brave in their emotions, in their honesty, and in their willingness to accept the truth. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of calm. "Then let us honor what we have in the way it deserves," he said. "Let us continue to work together, share stories, and support one another. Let us celebrate the bond that has grown over the years, and let it guide us as we face whatever life brings next." The women's faces brightened, their smiles genuine and warm. There was no disappointment, only a quiet acknowledgement of the strength and integrity in Jack's words. Over the following days, Jack and the women focused on their daily tasks, but the atmosphere was different, lighter, more harmonious, and filled with mutual respect. They worked together to repair fences, care for the animals, and manage the ranch. The challenges of the land continued, but the tension that had existed around the proposal had lifted. There was a sense of clarity, a shared understanding that their connection did not require labels or expectations. It was enough to be present for one another, to offer support, and to honor the experiences they had shared. One afternoon, Jack led the women to a secluded spot near the canyon, a place where the river ran calm and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers. He wanted to show them a part of the land that held deep meaning for him, a place where he often went to reflect. The women listened as he spoke about his life, his past challenges, and the lessons he had learned from the land and the animals. They asked questions, eager to understand his perspective, and Jack felt a deep sense of connection as they engaged with his experiences. In turn, the women shared their stories, memories of their village, their families, and the challenges they had faced in the years since he had saved them. Jack listened intently, marveling at their resilience, intelligence, and courage. He realized that the bond they shared was built on mutual respect, understanding, and a recognition of each other's strengths. It was a bond that transcended expectations and definitions, and it was far more powerful than any traditional arrangement could provide. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple, Jack and the women sat quietly by the river. There was a sense of peace in the air, a recognition of the growth they had all experienced. Jack thought about the lessons he had learned: courage, honesty, and the importance of acting with integrity. He understood that true growth often came from facing difficult truths, accepting them, and moving forward with grace and clarity. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, the women worked together to prepare a simple meal. Jack watched them, feeling a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Their growth, resilience, and understanding had transformed the ranch into a place of harmony, learning, and mutual respect. He realized that the challenges they had faced, the flood, the stampede, and the unexpected emotions, had strengthened their bond and prepared them for whatever future awaited them. Night fell, and the ranch grew quiet. Jack sat outside, gazing at the stars that blanketed the sky. He reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. From the day he had saved the women to the challenges and emotions of the present. He understood that life was unpredictable, filled with both joy and difficulty, and that the strength of human connection lay in honesty, courage, and mutual respect. The bond he shared with the women was rare and precious, a reminder that the most meaningful relationships were often forged in adversity and nurtured over time. In the days that followed, Jack noticed subtle changes in the women. They moved with confidence, but also with thoughtfulness. Their laughter was full and genuine, and their presence brought a sense of balance to the ranch. Jack realized that the true lesson of their reunion was not about love in the romantic sense, but about understanding, respect, and shared growth. They had faced challenges together, navigated emotions honestly, and strengthened their bond in a way that would endure far longer than any fleeting promise could. Jack also began to see the impact of their presence on himself. He felt more connected to the land, more aware of the importance of relationships, and more committed to living with integrity. The women's courage, honesty, and resilience inspired him to be the best version of himself, not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through everyday choices, patience, and care. The lessons they had learned from each other were subtle but profound, shaping their lives in ways that could not be measured but could only be felt. As the weeks passed, the bond between Jack and the three women grew stronger. They faced small challenges together: the weather, animal care, and the demands of ranch life. But each obstacle reinforced their trust and understanding. They learned from each other, supported one another, and celebrated the moments of joy and success. Jack realized that the true reward of their reunion was not the fulfillment of an expectation, but the growth, respect, and connection they shared, a bond that would remain unbroken, no matter what life brought. And so the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a home, a sanctuary, and a testament to courage, honesty, and human connection. Jack knew that the journey was far from over, and that life would continue to present challenges, emotions, and unexpected moments. But he also knew that, together, they could face anything. The lessons of the past, the experiences of the present, and the strength of their bond would guide them, ensuring that their lives remained intertwined, meaningful, and full of purpose. Time had passed, and the ranch had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The three Apache women had become a part of Jack Thompson's daily life, and he had grown to understand them not just as guests or acquaintances, but as companions, teachers, and friends who shared a bond few could understand. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's needs, laughing at little jokes only they understood, and supporting one another through the hard work and the small victories of ranch life. Jack often reflected on how a single act of courage, saving their lives 10 years ago, had led to a connection that shaped the rest of his life in ways he could never have imagined. That morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Jack mounted his horse and rode toward the northern edge of the ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scents of wildflowers, fresh hay, and the soft musk of the animals grazing nearby. Behind him, he could hear the women moving about, preparing breakfast and tending to chores. He felt a sense of calm, knowing that the work would be shared and that the day would pass not in solitude but in connection and purpose. As he reached the canyon, Jack paused, taking in the view. The river ran calmly now, unlike the raging flood that had threatened the lives of the three women so many years ago. The memories of that day were vivid in his mind: the fear in their eyes, the strength in their small hands, and the trust that had allowed him to guide them to safety. Jack realized that day had been more than an act of heroism. It had been the start of a lifelong bond, one that would continue to shape both his life and theirs. When he returned to the ranch, the women greeted him warmly. Their smiles were full of life, their eyes reflecting the same courage and determination they had shown years before. One of them, the youngest, carried a basket of fresh eggs from the coop. Another brought herbs from the garden, their aroma filling the air. Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude. Their presence had changed the ranch, but more importantly, it had changed him. He was no longer just a solitary cowboy. He was part of a living, breathing community, bound by trust, respect, and shared experiences. That day, they worked together to mend fences along the far edge of the property. The sun climbed higher, beating down on their backs, but none complained. They moved as a team, their actions synchronized through years of cooperation. Jack marveled at how the women had learned the rhythms of ranch life, how quickly they adapted, and how thoughtfully they approached each task. It was a reminder that courage and intelligence often went hand in hand, and that true strength lay in perseverance, patience, and the willingness to help others without expecting anything in return. During a brief rest under the shade of a large oak tree, they shared stories. The women spoke of their families, the changes in their village, and the paths they had taken over the past decade. Jack listened intently, fascinated by the resilience and determination they had displayed. He shared his own experiences, tales of storms, challenges with the animals, and the quiet lessons of life on the plains. There was a sense of reciprocity in their conversation, a mutual respect that made the bond between them deeper than any promise or expectation could have achieved. Later in the afternoon, a visitor arrived at the ranch, a young man from the nearby town who had heard of Jack's legendary courage years ago. He had come to meet the cowboy who had saved the 3 Apache women. Jack welcomed him, offering food and water, and introduced him to the women. They shared their story with the visitor, explaining how Jack had risked his life to save them during the flood 10 years earlier. The young man listened in awe, realizing that the events had created not just a heroic tale, but a lasting story of human connection, gratitude, and courage. As evening approached, Jack and the women gathered near the fire. They roasted corn and shared a simple meal, reflecting on the events of the day. The work had been hard, but the shared effort had strengthened their bond even more. Jack realized that life's greatest lessons often came not from dramatic moments alone, but from the quiet, consistent choices made day after day, the willingness to help, to respect, and to grow together. The women spoke softly about their gratitude once more, recalling the flood and the fear they had felt. "We could never have survived without you," one of them said, her voice filled with sincerity. Jack shook his head, smiling. "It was not just me," he replied. "You were brave and you acted with courage even when the situation was terrifying. You saved yourselves as much as I helped you. That is the truth of it." The women nodded, understanding the depth of his words. Their eyes glistened with emotion, but there was no sadness, only acknowledgement of the bond that had carried them through danger and years apart. Night fell, and the stars appeared one by one, scattered across the vast sky like tiny diamonds. The desert was quiet, save for the soft rustling of the wind and the occasional call of an owl. Jack sat with the women, looking up at the constellations, feeling a profound sense of peace. The past 10 years, filled with challenges, solitude, and reflection, had led to this moment, a reunion not defined by expectation or obligation, but by respect, courage, and shared experiences. Jack understood that this was a rare gift, one that few ever experienced in a lifetime. In the days that followed, the ranch continued its rhythm. They faced small challenges, repairing fences, guiding the cattle, tending to the garden, but each obstacle reinforced their connection. Jack noticed that the women moved with confidence, their hands skilled, their judgment sharp, and their hearts generous. He realized that true strength was not only in physical skill or bravery in moments of danger, but in the quiet, consistent courage of living honestly, acting with integrity, and supporting one another. Jack also began to reflect on his own growth. He had always been independent, valuing solitude and self-reliance. But the women's presence had taught him that life could be richer when shared with others, that courage and kindness could ripple through time, and that the connections we form often leave lasting impacts on both sides. The reunion had reminded him that human bonds built on trust and respect could endure across distance, culture, and years. One afternoon, Jack led the women to the edge of the canyon. He wanted to show them a place that had always been special to him, a quiet spot where the river ran calm and the sunlight danced on the water. They sat together, watching the reflections, and spoke of life's unpredictability. Jack explained how each challenge, whether a storm, a stampede, or a flood, had shaped him. The women listened intently, nodding, and shared how those same events had shaped them. It was a moment of mutual reflection, where the past and present intertwined, and the bond between them grew stronger than ever. As the sun began to set, the women gathered around Jack, expressing their gratitude in ways that transcended words. They did not ask for promises, for wealth, or for security. They only sought acknowledgement, respect, and the continued bond that had formed so many years ago. Jack smiled, realizing that this was the true reward of his actions, not recognition, not obligation, but the lasting impact of courage, kindness, and human connection. That night, under the vast expanse of the desert sky, Jack lay awake reflecting on the journey. The past 10 years had taught him more than any single moment could. He had learned that bravery was not just in acts of heroism, but in honesty, patience, and the willingness to face life's challenges with integrity. He understood that the connections we make, even in brief or unexpected moments, could shape the rest of our lives. The bond with the women was proof of that, an enduring reminder that gratitude, courage, and respect could create something far more valuable than simple rewards. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Life on the ranch continued, with its routines, small victories, and occasional challenges. Jack and the women had created a community of support, learning from one another, growing together, and celebrating each day with gratitude. They faced hardships, yes, but the strength of their connection allowed them to endure and thrive. Jack often thought back to the day he had saved them, realizing that the true miracle was not in the act itself, but in the lasting relationships that grew from it. In the end, Jack Thompson's life was richer, fuller, and more meaningful because of the bond he shared with the three Apache women. They had returned to show gratitude, but they had given him far more in return, a sense of connection, understanding, and the knowledge that courage, kindness, and honesty could create a legacy that lasted a lifetime. The cowboy who had once lived in solitude now found joy in shared work, laughter, and the simple, profound satisfaction of knowing that his life had touched, and been touched by, others in ways he would never forget. Jack never expected such a reunion, nor did he anticipate the depth of the connection that had grown over the years. Yet, as he watched the women laugh and work beside him, he understood that life often surprises us in the most remarkable ways. The acts of courage, honesty, and compassion that we give freely can return to us in ways far greater than we could ever imagine. And sometimes, the most enduring legacy is not fame, wealth, or recognition, but the hearts we touch, the bonds we form, and the lives we help shape. And so, the ranch remained a place of work, laughter, and quiet reflection, where Jack and the three women continued their lives together. Their story became not just a tale of survival, but a testament to the power of human connection, the courage to act, the strength to trust, and the wisdom to honor the bonds that shape our lives. 10 years after that fateful day, Jack knew one thing for certain. Life's greatest rewards often came not from grand gestures, but from the lasting relationships we build, nurtured by courage, honesty, and respect.